Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is frown. Let's take a moment and look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb frown is to mean to form an expression of disapproval or displeasure, typically by turning down the corners of the mouth, right? Yesterday's verb was the opposite. It was smile, right? So you can hopefully see the corners of my mouth go up as I say that, but frown is again that opposite, turn the corners down. Typically, people might do that because they are not approving of something that's occurring. They might be displeased or sad. There might be other emotions as well connected to that, but typically those are some of the strongest ones. Now, a second way you might encounter the verb frown can mean to give evidence of displeasure or disapproval by a facial expression. Again, I've noticed this second definition being used in literature, describing a character frowning her disagreement or his disagreement. And so the author, I think, is using that many times to kind of paint a picture, right? We can imagine what this character looks like, and we can imagine what is occurring with their mouths. For now, you should know that frown is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to form frowning. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, frown, ends in a voiced in sound. This means when we add the ed ending, we're just going to make a d sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable as we say it. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: frowned, frowned. Okay. Now, I do have a couple phrasal verbs for us to discuss. The first is to frown at. And again, this is more of a literal definition. So you are directing that look to a particular person. And again, it's sort of a displeased or a look of disapproval. An example of this phrasal verb in a sentence might be, the student frowned at the essay question. Maybe this has happened to you. You're taking a test, you read a question, and then, right? Because you don't feel like you know it, or maybe it was something you didn't prepare for. Now, a second way to use frown at can mean to express or exhibit disapproval of someone or something. So, an example of this might be, his parents have frowned at many of their children's decisions. Okay? So here, it might not only mean just their look, it could include some other actions or words, but it's suggesting they do not approve of the decisions this group of children have been making. Our last phrasal verb to discuss today is to frown on or frown upon. Both of these, frown on or frown upon, is really talking about not approving of something or to disapprove. An example of this: this manager frowns upon anyone leaving a minute early, right? So here, maybe we're talking about someone who is very strict, right? Not going to be happy if this particular person finds that workers or employees are leaving their shift even just a single minute early. So they do not approve. Now let's practice our verb of the day, frown, in a couple different verb tenses. Today we're going to practice the past perfect and the present perfect progressive. Let's start with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about a completed action. But what makes this different from just the simple past tense is that there is emphasis on this action occurring before another action or occurring before a certain period of time. Again, if you look at the name of this verb tense, past perfect, I hope you can see the 2-letter P's, and I hope this will help you remember that you need 2 parts to your verb. Okay? We're going to be using the past form of have, and that's had, and then we're going to use the participle form of our verb. So whenever we make sentences in this verb tense, our structure is going to stay the same, no matter what our subject is. Let's take a look at an affirmative example. The committee had frowned at the public release of their report. Okay. So here, committee is talking usually about a group of people, right? That's my subject, the committee. Here's the first part of my verb, had, and then the participle form of the verb. So they did not approve that whatever report got released, maybe to the media and then shared more widely. If you want to make a negative past perfect sentence, then what you should do is start with your subject, right? Then we're going to use had not, and then the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at another sentence. A doctor began injecting herself with Botox in 1987 and noticed she hadn't frowned since. Okay. Now, I borrowed this sentence from a true story about how this cosmetic procedure was invented. So there are some people that don't care for this idea of wrinkles, maybe on our forehead. Sometimes they're called smile lines even. Right? And so there's a type of treatment that exists for that. I've never done this. You can probably tell by all the wrinkles I possess, but here we're noticing sort of the absence of this activity occurring. And this news article did use the past perfect to describe it. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, start with had, then you're going to have your subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's the last example. Had they frowned upon this practice before this week, right? So again, this might go back to that disapproval meaning, right? So someone is doing something a particular way, and now others are expressing that they do not approve of it. Right? We want to really focus on had others expressed that disapproval before this week. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the present perfect progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that started in the past and continue into the present, and they may even continue into the future. Many teachers and textbooks, as well as YouTube videos, will call this the present perfect continuous. And that's great. Present perfect progressive, present perfect continuous, they mean exactly the same thing. The reason I like using present perfect progressive with my students is I hope they will be able to see 3 parts to my verb, right? So 3 P's, right? Present perfect progressive, we're going to have 3 parts to our verb. And in this verb tense, we must pay attention to our subjects. If my subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use have as the first part of my verb. Then I'll use the participle been, B-E-E-N, and then the ing form the verb. But if my subject is he, she, or it, then I want to use has, H-A-S, been, and the ing form the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. My friend has been frowning for weeks, but he won't tell me why. Okay? So here I'm describing this action, right? So I know my friend is displeased or not approving of something, but I don't know why. This action is continuing, and it sounds like it may continue into the future. Now, if you want to make a negative present perfect progressive sentence, what you need to do is start with your subject, then use have or has, whichever form matches that subject, then use not before the participle been, and then the ing for the verb. Here's another example. The school district hasn't been frowning on this book series. Okay? So here it means they are not disapproving of it, right? It might sound like they are approving that this particular series of books be used in classes. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect progressive. To do this, start with have or has, whichever form matches your subject. That subject comes next. Use the participle been and then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Have the students been frowning all day? Right? So here we're asking yes or no, right? Is this an action that started in the past and is continuing into this moment where we are speaking? Now let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb frown. And the first word we're going to discuss is just the noun form of this word. The noun frown has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as the verb. When I use the word as a noun, I'm referring to a facial expression that indicates disapproval, displeasure. For some people, it might also be a sign of concentration, a very focused look. And again, most notably are the corners of our mouths turned down. An example of this noun in a sentence might be, frowns filled the room because no one was excited about the proposed changes. Right? So maybe we're talking about some sort of public meeting, right? And some new thing is being announced, right? And as people hear about it, right, they are signaling with their facial expressions that they do not approve of the changes. One more word for us today. It's the adverb frowningly. That ly is usually signaling that we have an adverb. So we're describing either an action or we're describing another adjective to note that something is occurring while frowning, right? An example of this might be, traditionalists have looked on frowningly. Right? So a traditionalist is someone who believes in kind of the way things have been done for a long period of time. And so again, maybe we have some new change, a new way of doing things, right? And now frowningly is describing our phrasal verb here, looked on, right? How are they doing it? In a way that indicates they are displeased or that they do not approve. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.